You've been told your entire life that hard work leads to freedom, but what if the very system that promised you security is designed to consume your best years, then discard you the moment you can no longer produce? What if everything you were taught about work, success, and retirement was a trap? Good evening. I want to talk with you tonight about something that most people never question, something so deeply woven into the fabric of our society that to challenge it seems almost rebellious. And yet, if you're listening to this message right now, something inside you is already stirring. Some part of you already knows the truth. You were trained to work until you're useless. Let me say that again, because it bears repeating. From the time you were old enough to sit in a classroom, you were being prepared not for freedom, not for greatness, not for a life of purpose, but to fit neatly into a system that needs your labor, your energy, your time. And then, when you've given all you have to give, to quietly step aside. Now, I'm not here to condemn honest work. Far from it. There is dignity in labor. There is honor in earning your way. But there is a vast difference between working with purpose and working without thought. And most people, good, decent, hard-working people, have never stopped long enough to ask themselves a simple question. Am I working to build a life, or am I working to avoid thinking about the life I'm not living? You see, the system we were born into wasn't designed with your happiness in mind. It was designed for productivity, efficiency, output. And you precious, unique, irreplaceable, you were trained to see yourself as a resource, a cog in a machine, a pair of hands, a strong back, a sharp mind, until the day those things begin to fail, and then the system has no more use for you. They call it retirement. But what is it, really? It's the finish line of a race you never agreed to run. It's the promised land that waits at the end of 40 years of commutes, compromises, and slow, silent surrender. And here's the cruelest irony of all: by the time most people reach that finish line, they're too tired, too worn, too emptied out to truly live. They've spent the best years of their lives preparing for the worst ones. But you don't have to. Let me tell you something I've learned, something that changed my life the moment I truly understood it. The only real security in life comes from knowing that every single day you are improving yourself in some way, becoming more valuable, more capable, more independent. Not your job, not your employer, not your pension plan, your mind, your skills, your ability to create value in the world. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know: the moment you stop depending entirely on someone else to determine your worth, your schedule, your income, the moment you take full responsibility for your own growth and contribution, you become free. Not someday, not when you retire. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But Earl, I have bills to pay. I have responsibilities. I can't just walk away from my job and chase some dream. And you're right. I'm not suggesting recklessness. I'm not asking you to quit your job tomorrow morning and declare yourself an entrepreneur. What I am asking you to do is this: wake up. Wake up to the fact that the most valuable asset you possess isn't your ability to follow orders, it's your ability to think, to learn, to create, to solve problems. And every single day that you spend doing work that doesn't demand the best of you, you are allowing that asset to depreciate. You were not put on this earth to be comfortable. You were put here to grow, to stretch, to become more than you were yesterday. And the system that trained you to punch a clock and collect a paycheck has one fatal flaw: it depends on you not realizing this. So how do you break free? Not all at once, not with fireworks and grand gestures. You break free the same way you became trapped, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one small decision at a time. First, you must decide, and I mean truly decide, not wish, not hope, not maybe someday, but decide that you are no longer willing to trade the best hours of your life for the illusion of security. Decide that your time, your energy, your mind are worth more than what someone else is willing to pay for them. Second, you must learn, read, study, grow. The world is changing faster than it ever has before, and those who stop learning become obsolete. But those who commit to constant improvement, they become indispensable, not because someone gave them a title, but because they made themselves valuable. Third, you must create. Start small. It doesn't matter what it is. A side project, a skill you've always wanted to develop, a service you can offer, a product you can build. The act of creation is the act of claiming ownership over your own life. Every hour you spend building something that belongs to you is an hour you're no longer entirely dependent on someone else. Fourth, you must invest not just your money, but your time. Invest in relationships, in knowledge, in your health, in the things that compound over time and cannot be taken from you. Because the greatest investment you will ever make is in yourself. And finally, you must persist. This will not be easy. There will be doubt. There will be setbacks. There will be people, good people, people who love you, who will tell you to be realistic, to play it safe, to stick with what you know. And you must smile, thank them for their concern, and keep moving forward anyway. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I am not telling you that work is bad. I am not telling you that having a job makes you a failure. What I am telling you is this. If you wake up every morning with a sense of dread, if you spend your days watching the clock, counting down the hours until you can leave, if your only motivation is the paycheck that lets you survive until the next paycheck, then you are not living. You are enduring. And you were made for so much more than that. The tragedy of modern life is not that people work too hard, it's that they work without purpose. They climb ladders that are leaning against the wrong walls. They sacrifice their health, their relationships, their peace of mind in pursuit of goals they never truly chose. But it doesn't have to be this way. There are men and women all around you right now, today, who have broken free. Not because they were lucky. Not because they were born with advantages you don't have, but because they made a decision. They decided that the script they were handed was not the one they were willing to follow. They decided to write their own. And so can you. You know, there's something most of us never stop to consider. We wake up. We go to work. We come home. We repeat. Day after day, year after year. And somewhere along the way, we stop asking ourselves why. We just accept it. As if this is the only way. As if this is how life has always been and how it must always be. But let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this for a moment before you answer. When did you decide that 40 hours a week of your life belonged to someone else? Take your time with that question. Because I'm willing to bet that you didn't decide. Not really, it was decided for you. Long before you ever filled out your first job application, long before your first interview, long before you signed your first employment contract, the decision had already been made. Now, before I go any further, I want you to understand something. I'm not going to rush through this. This is too important. What I'm about to share with you is something that, once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee. And that's exactly as it should be. So just stay with me. Listen, and let this settle in your mind. You see, about 200 years ago, something happened. The world changed. Factories rose up. Machines hummed to life. And for the first time in human history, productivity wasn't tied to the rhythm of the seasons or the rising and setting of the sun. It was tied to the clock, the shift, the schedule, and the people who owned those factories, smart people, ambitious people. They had a problem. They needed workers. Lots of them. Reliable, predictable, obedient workers who would show up on time, do what they were told, and not ask too many questions. So what did they do? They didn't just hire people. They trained them. They worked with governments and schools to create a system, an entire system designed to produce exactly the kind of worker they needed. Children were taught to sit in rows, to raise their hands, to follow bells and schedules, to accept authority without question, to value punctuality, obedience, and conformity above curiosity, creativity, and independent thought. And it worked, brilliantly. Generation after generation grew up believing that this was normal, that trading hours for dollars was the way life worked, that security came from finding a good job with a good company, and staying there until someone decided you'd earned the right to rest. But here's what nobody told you, what they couldn't tell you, because the whole system depends on you not knowing it. That arrangement was never designed for your benefit. It was designed to serve the needs of an industrial economy. And while the world has changed, while technology has exploded, while entire industries have vanished and new ones have emerged, the fundamental belief remains: your time, your energy, your labor. These things exist to be purchased by someone else, at a rate they determine, for as long as they need you, and when they don't need you anymore. Well, there's a system for that too. They call it retirement. They call it a gold watch and a pension. They call it earning your rest. But let me tell you what it really is. It's the same system that bought your time, telling you that now that you're older, slower, less productive, now you can have your life back. You can have your mornings, your freedom, your time to pursue what matters. Except there's one small problem: you've spent 40 years practicing how to not be free. You've spent 40 years letting someone else decide when you wake up, where you go, what you do, when you eat, when you rest. And now, suddenly, you're supposed to know what to do with freedom. Most people don't. They coast. They fade. They watch television and wait for doctor's appointments and wonder where all the years went. This is the illusion. Not that work is bad. Not that earning a living is wrong. But that the only way, the right way, the safe way, is to hand over control of your life to someone else in exchange for a paycheck and the promise that someday, if you're good, if you're loyal, if you don't cause trouble, someday you'll get to live. Well, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to accept the deal you were handed. You don't have to spend the best years of your life making someone else's dreams come true while your own gather dust. You can choose differently, and it starts the moment you see the illusion for what it is. Picture this for a moment. You're 65 years old, maybe older. You've worked hard, really hard for 40, maybe 45 years. You've been dependable. You've shown up. You've done what was expected of you. And now, finally, they're handing you a gold watch, shaking your hand, and telling you that you've earned the right to enjoy your life. Except when you look in the mirror that morning, something feels off. Your knees ache. Your back isn't what it used to be. The energy you had at 30, that drive, that fire, that sense of possibility, it's dimmed. And you think to yourself, this is it. This is freedom. This is what I've been working toward all these years. But is it? Is it really? Now, I don't want you to close your mind to what I'm about to say. Just listen. Let it sit with you for a moment. Don't react. Don't defend. Just consider. Because there's something we need to talk about. Something that's been sold to us as wisdom, as prudence, as the responsible way to live our lives. And it goes something like this: work hard now, sacrifice now. Delay your dreams, your adventures, your deepest desires. Put them on hold. And someday, when you've paid your dues, when you've saved enough, when you've reached that magic number on your birthday, then you can live. Then you can travel. Then you can pursue your passions. Then you can spend time with the people you love. Then you can finally become the person you always wanted to be. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? It sounds responsible, safe, smart. But let me ask you something. Let me ask you to think about someone you know, maybe someone in your own family, who worked their entire life with this promise in mind. Who counted down the days until retirement? Who had plans, dreams, a long list of things they were going to do when they had time? And then, what happened? Did they take that trip around the world? Or did health problems get in the way? Did they finally write that book, start that business, learn that language? Or did they find that after decades of being told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, they'd forgotten how to dream? You see, here's the thing most people never want to face, never want to admit, never want to confront until it's too late. The person you are at 65 is not the same person you are at 30. The body you have, yes, but more than that, the mind you have, the spirit you have, the capacity for adventure, for risk, for starting something new. These things change, not because they have to, not because it's inevitable, but because we practice. Every single day, we practice being someone. And if you spend 40 years practicing caution, practicing obedience, practicing the art of waiting, then waiting is what you become good at. Think about it. You spend the best years of your life, the years when you're strong, when you're energetic, when you have the health and vitality to truly live, and you spend those years preparing for a future that may never come, or worse, a future that comes. But you're too tired, too set in your ways, too beaten down to actually enjoy it. This isn't freedom. This is a trade. A terrible trade. You're giving up your now for a maybe. You're sacrificing your present, the only moment you actually have, for a promise that sounds good on paper, but rarely delivers in reality. And the cruelest part, you've been taught to feel guilty for questioning this, to feel selfish for wanting more than a distant, hypothetical reward, to feel foolish for believing that your life, your one life, deserves to be lived fully starting today. But here's what I want you to understand. Here's what changes everything once you really grasp it. Every day you're alive is a gift, not a rehearsal, not a waiting room, not a holding pattern until real life begins. This is it. This is your life. Right now. This moment. This day. And if you're spending it in a way that drains you, that diminishes you, that requires you to put your truest self on hold, then you're not preparing for life. You're avoiding it. The good news, and yes, there is good news, is that you don't have to wait. You don't have to postpone joy, purpose, and meaning until someone gives you permission to retire. You can start living intentionally now, building a life you don't need to escape from, creating work that fulfills you rather than exhausts you. Freedom isn't something that arrives on your 65th birthday. Freedom is something you claim today, by refusing to delay the life you were meant to live. Let me tell you about something that happened not too long ago. A man, hardworking, loyal, dedicated, spent 23 years with the same company. He came in early. He stayed late. He did everything they asked and more. He believed that if he just kept his head down and did good work, he'd be taken care of. Then one Tuesday morning, he was called into an office and told that his position was being eliminated, just like that. 23 years. Gone. And as he walked out of that building with a cardboard box under his arm, he realized something that terrified him. He didn't know what to do next. His entire identity, his entire sense of worth, his entire understanding of who he was in the world, it had all been tied to that job. Now, you might be thinking, that's tragic. That's unfair. And you'd be right. But here's what I want you to consider, and take your time with this, because it matters more than almost anything else I'm going to tell you. That man's real problem wasn't that he lost his job. His real problem was that he'd spent 23 years building someone else's dream while his own abilities quietly atrophied. He'd traded the most valuable thing he possessed, his capacity to think, to learn, to grow, to adapt for the comfort of a steady paycheck. And when that paycheck disappeared, he had nothing left. Now, I'm not sharing this story to judge him. I'm sharing it because it could be any of us. Because every single day, thousands of good people make the same mistake. They believe that security comes from a company, a contract, a pension plan. They believe that as long as they show up and do what they're told, they'll be safe. But they won't. They can't be. Because the world doesn't work that way anymore if it ever did. Here's something I've learned over many years of studying successful people, people who've built lives of true independence and contribution. The only real security you will ever have doesn't come from someone else. It comes from you. Specifically, it comes from your ability to create value, to solve problems, to think clearly, to learn continuously, to adapt when circumstances change. Your mind, your capacity to grow, to reason, to acquire new knowledge and skills is the one asset that can never be downsized, outsourced, or taken away from you. It's the one thing that appreciates in value the more you use it. Think about that for a moment. Your car depreciates. Your house needs constant maintenance. Even your physical strength, as much as we wish it weren't so, diminishes over time. But your mind can become sharper, more capable, more valuable with every passing year if you invest in it, if you feed it, if you challenge it, if you refuse to let it coast. The problem is, most people stop learning the day they leave school. They think education is something that happens in a classroom, something that ends when you get a diploma, and from that point on, they simply maintain. They do the same things, think the same thoughts, follow the same routines year after year after year, and then they wonder why they feel stuck, why they feel trapped, why they feel like the world is passing them by. But here's the beautiful truth, the truth that changes everything. You are not stuck. You are not trapped. You are not limited by your current circumstances unless you choose to be. Because no matter where you are, no matter what's happened in your past, no matter how many opportunities you think you've missed, you still have your mind. And if you're willing to invest in it, to develop it, to push it beyond its current limits, you can create value in ways you haven't even imagined yet. I'm talking about really reading. Not just skimming headlines or scrolling through distractions, but diving deep into books written by people who've mastered what you want to learn. I'm talking about studying, practicing, developing skills that make you indispensable not because you have a title, but because you can do things that matter. I'm talking about becoming a person who solves problems instead of creating them, who adds value instead of just collecting a paycheck, who brings something to the table that can't be easily replaced. When you do this, when you commit to growing your mind, expanding your capabilities, becoming more valuable, something remarkable happens. You stop being dependent. You stop living in quiet terror that someone might take away your livelihood. You stop feeling like you're at the mercy of forces beyond your control, because you're not. You become the person companies want to hire, the person clients want to work with, the person who can create opportunities instead of waiting for them to appear. You become free, not because you have money, not because you don't have to work, but because you know deep in your bones that no matter what happens, you can figure it out. You can learn, you can adapt, you can create value. And that, my friend, that is the only security worth having. There's a question I've asked hundreds of people over the years. It's a simple question, really. But the answers, or rather the lack of answers, tell me everything I need to know about why so many people feel lost, stuck, unfulfilled. Here's the question. If money were no object, if you didn't have to worry about bills or mortgages or putting food on the table, what would you do with your life? And do you know what happens? Most people freeze. They stammer. They look at me like I've just asked them to solve an impossible puzzle, because they've spent so many years focused on surviving that they've forgotten how to think about living. They've forgotten what they actually want, what moves them, what makes them feel alive. And that right there is the quiet tragedy of our modern world. Now, before you think I'm about to tell you to quit your job and follow some vague passion without a plan, just hold on. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you isn't reckless romanticism. It's practical wisdom that could change the entire trajectory of your life. You see, there's a fundamental difference between working for money and working for meaning. And most people, most good, hardworking, responsible people have spent their entire lives chasing the first while completely ignoring the second. They wake up. They commute. They perform tasks they don't care about, for people they don't particularly like, building something they have no real connection to. And they do it all for one reason: the paycheck, the money, the bills that need to be paid. And there's nothing wrong with paying bills. Nothing wrong with being responsible. But here's what happens when that's all you're doing. When that's the only reason you show up every day, you start to hollow out. Bit by bit, day by day, you lose something essential. That spark, that sense of possibility, that feeling that what you're doing matters, that you're contributing something meaningful to the world, that your life is adding up to something more than just existence. You become a ghost, present in body, but absent in spirit, going through the motions, collecting your check, counting down the days until the weekend, until vacation, until retirement, until that distant someday when you'll finally have permission to care about something. But that someday never comes. Not really. Because by the time you get there, you've spent so many years practicing not caring, practicing just getting through, practicing the art of settling, that you've forgotten how to do anything else. Now I want you to think about something. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who seem truly alive, the ones who have energy, enthusiasm, a sense of direction, the ones who wake up with purpose. Are they the ones chasing the biggest paycheck? Or are they the ones who found something worth doing and committed themselves to doing it well? I'll tell you what I've observed. The most successful people, and by successful, I don't just mean wealthy, I mean fulfilled, content, at peace with themselves. These people aren't working primarily for money. They're working for something bigger. A mission, a contribution, a purpose that gives their days meaning. And here's the interesting thing: when you work with that kind of purpose, when you're genuinely trying to serve, to create, to solve real problems, to make a genuine difference, the money tends to follow. Not always immediately, not always in the way you expected, but it follows. Because people can sense when you're just going through the motions, when you're only in it for the paycheck. And they can also sense when you genuinely care, when you're committed to excellence, when you're driven by something deeper than just collecting a check. And they want to work with that person. They want to hire that person. They want to pay that person. So here's what I want you to consider, and really sit with this, because it might be the most important question you ask yourself all year. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What problem would you solve? What would you create? What contribution would you make to the world? Because whatever just came to mind, that flicker of an idea, that thing you dismissed as impractical or impossible, that's your purpose trying to get your attention. And yes, you still have bills to pay. Yes, you still have responsibilities. Yes, you can't just abandon everything tomorrow. But you can start moving toward it. You can start thinking about it. You can start developing the skills you'd need. You can start taking small steps in that direction. Because here's the truth: A life spent chasing money without meaning is a prison sentence. But a life spent pursuing purpose, even if it's difficult, even if it requires sacrifice, even if it doesn't make sense to everyone around you, that's a life worth living. That's freedom. Real freedom. Not someday. Starting today. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. When was the last time you created something truly yours that didn't require anyone's permission, anyone's approval, anyone's signature on a timesheet? When was the last time you built something, made something, produced something that belonged entirely to you? Not to your employer, not to your company, not to someone who pays you by the hour, to you. If you're struggling to answer that question, you're not alone. Most people can't remember, because most people spend their entire lives working on projects they don't own, building dreams they'll never benefit from, pouring their energy into enterprises where someone else reaps the rewards. And after a while, something happens. Something subtle but devastating. You start to believe that this is just how it works, that your job is to show up, do what you're told, and collect your pay. That ownership, real ownership, is for other people, the lucky ones, the privileged ones, the ones who had advantages you didn't have. But that's not true. It's never been true. Now, I need you to understand something before we go any further. I'm not suggesting that having a job makes you a failure. I'm not saying that working for someone else is wrong or shameful. What I am saying is this. If 100% of your income, 100% of your security, 100% of your future depends entirely on someone else's decisions you have no control over, then you are not secure. You are vulnerable, and somewhere deep down you know it. You feel it every time there's talk of budget cuts, restructuring, downsizing. You feel it every time you hear about someone else losing their job. You feel it in that low-level anxiety that hums in the background of your life, that quiet voice that whispers, "What if they don't need me anymore? What if I'm next?" That's not security. That's dependency. And dependency, no matter how comfortable it feels, is the opposite of freedom. So what's the alternative? Ownership. Not necessarily owning a business, though that's certainly one path. I'm talking about something broader, something more fundamental. I'm talking about owning something that generates value independent of your direct labor, something that works for you, even when you're not working, something that can't be taken away by a boardroom decision or an economic downturn. It could be a skill you've developed that people will pay you to teach. It could be a product you've created that solves a real problem. It could be a service you provide on your own terms. It could be intellectual property, a book, a course, a system, a method that continues to serve people long after you've created it. The point isn't what you own. The point is that you own something. Because here's what changes the moment you do. You stop being entirely at someone else's mercy. You stop waking up in the middle of the night worried about what would happen if they decided they didn't need you anymore. You stop feeling like your entire life could crumble based on a decision you had no part in making. You breathe differently. You walk differently. You think differently. Not because you're suddenly rich. Not because you've quit your job and become some kind of mogul. But because you've reclaimed a piece of yourself. You've created something that belongs to you. That reflects your effort, your creativity, your unique contribution to the world. And once you've done it once you've proven to yourself that you can create value on your own terms, everything changes. You start to see opportunities everywhere. You start to think like an owner instead of an employee. You start asking different questions. Not, how can I keep this job? But, how can I create more value? What does my boss want? But what problem can I solve? Not, how do I get through another week? But what can I build that lasts? This is what ownership does. It transforms you from someone waiting for permission into someone who creates possibilities. From someone who trades time for money into someone who builds assets. From someone who hopes for security into someone who creates it. And the beautiful part, you don't need anyone's permission to start. You don't need a degree. You don't need a loan. You don't need connections or luck or perfect circumstances. You just need to decide that a piece of your life, your time, your talent, your energy belongs to you. And you need to invest it in something you own. Start small. Start tonight. Start with 1 hour a week building something that's yours. Because the moment you do, you've taken the first step toward real freedom. And once you've taken that step, you'll never be quite the same again. You know what's interesting? I've talked with thousands of people over the years, people from all walks of life, different backgrounds, different circumstances, and I've noticed something remarkable. When they talk about changing their lives, about doing something different, about finally pursuing what they really want, do you know what phrase comes up again and again? Someday when things settle down, someday when I have more money saved, someday when the kids are older, someday when the timing is right. Someday, that beautiful, seductive, utterly devastating word. Because it sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? So responsible, so mature. You're not saying no to your dreams. You're just saying, not yet, not now. Someday, and the years pass, 1 turns into 5, 5 turns into 10, and someday never comes. Now, I want you to think about something, and I know this might be uncomfortable, but stay with me. Think about someone you know who's been talking about the same dream, the same goal, the same plan for years. Maybe it's starting a business. Maybe it's writing a book. Maybe it's learning a new skill, traveling somewhere meaningful, making a big change. And every time you ask them about it, they have a reason why now isn't the right time. A perfectly logical, completely understandable reason. But here's the question: when will be the right time? Next year? The year after that? When will all the conditions finally line up perfectly? When will all the obstacles magically disappear? When will the stars align in such a way that taking action feels completely safe and comfortable? I'll tell you when. Never. Because that perfect moment you're waiting for, it doesn't exist. It never has. It never will. Now, here's what I need you to understand, and this might be the most important thing I say to you today. You already know what you need to do. Deep down, in that quiet place where truth lives, you know exactly what step you need to take, what conversation you need to have, what skill you need to develop, what change you need to make. You've known for a while now, maybe for years. The only question is, are you going to keep waiting for permission that's never coming, or are you going to take one small, imperfect, courageous step today? Because here's what happens when you do. Here's what changes the moment you stop planning and start doing. The fog lifts. That's the best way I can describe it. You've been standing at the edge, looking out into this murky, uncertain future, trying to see the whole path before you take the first step. And it's paralyzing. It's overwhelming. There are too many unknowns, too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. But the moment you actually move, the moment you take that first concrete action, no matter how small something shifts, the path doesn't become completely clear. You don't suddenly see every step from here to your goal. But you see the next step, and that's all you need. You start to build momentum, confidence. Evidence that you're not stuck, that you're not helpless, that you're not just a passive passenger in your own life. You remember something you'd forgotten: you are capable. You can learn. You can figure things out. You can handle challenges. You can adapt, and every day that you take another step, even a tiny one, even an imperfect one, you become a different person. Not someday. Today. You become the kind of person who does things instead of just thinking about them. Who creates instead of just consuming. Who builds instead of just wishing. Think about it this way: 20 years ago, you had a choice. You could have started learning, building, creating, investing in yourself and your future. And if you had, where would you be now? That's not meant to make you feel regret. It's meant to wake you up to a simple truth. 20 years from now, you're going to look back at today, and you're going to have the same choice. You can look back and think, I wish I had started then. Or you can look back and think, I'm so grateful I began when I did. The decision you make today determines which of those thoughts you'll have. So let me ask you directly, what's one thing you can do today, right now, before this day ends, that moves you even 1 inch closer to the life you actually want? Not a big thing, not a dramatic thing, just something. Read 1 page of a book that teaches you what you need to know. Send 1 email. Make 1 phone call. Write 1 paragraph. Take 1 walk to clear your head and think. Spend 30 minutes researching, practicing, creating just 1 small thing, because that's how every great journey begins. Not with a lightning bolt of inspiration, not with perfect conditions, not someday when you're ready, but with 1 person on 1 ordinary day deciding that today is the day they stop waiting. Today is that day, and you are that person. Let me close with this. Time is the one resource you cannot get back. Every day that passes is a day you will never see again. And the question you must ask yourself honestly, courageously is this: am I spending my days in a way that honors the life I was given? Or am I sleepwalking through a script someone else wrote for me? If the answer troubles you, then you already know what you need to do. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you're ready, because you will never feel completely ready. Start today. Start now. Read one page. Learn one skill. Take one small step toward the life you want instead of the life you've settled for. Because here's the beautiful truth: the moment you start moving in the direction of your own growth, your own purpose, your own freedom, something inside you awakens. The fog lifts, the path becomes clearer, and you begin to remember what you always knew deep down. You were not meant to be used up and discarded. You were meant to matter, to contribute, to create, to live fully, richly, purposefully, not someday, but now. The system may have trained you to be dependent, but you have the power to train yourself to be free. The choice is yours. Make it today. Good night.